Hello and welcome back to the Book Marketing Tips and Author Success Podcast. This is Penny Sansevieri.
And Amy Cornell.
And we are back for another January episode. Amy, I really love the flow. I love how we're unpacking the new year with all of these episodes.
I know, it's really fun. I like that we've got such a solid trajectory of what we're covering and how they build off of each other. It feels really good because before, when we would come up with ideas, we'd look at recommendations. We love when y'all send in emails and texts with ideas, and we kind of all put that together in a pile and tried to figure out how to balance everything out. And we really found a good rhythm for how to do that. Because a lot of times, we're like, wait, have we talked about this recently? What haven't we talked about in a while? What haven't we touched on? What are some of the ideas we've gotten? And we've really figured out a way to balance all of that.
Yeah, we really have. So we, and by the way, we've gotten some feedback on these shows. Y'all really love the way that we are rolling out the, 2026 in terms of our show format. If you haven't already joined our podcast text network, please do so. Text the word podcast to 888-402-8940, and you can communicate with us directly. Send us your show ideas. Let us know what you think of a particular episode, or if you're a new listener, what you'd like to see more of, what you're struggling with. And we actually get questions through the texting, listeners text us questions. So we really love that too. So text us your questions, all the things. Text the word podcast to 888-402-8940. And in the show notes, you'll see a link to our survey. We're still running the survey, and we're getting some really great responses from y'all. So be sure to do that as well, because we do build these shows around you guys. All right. So today's episode is new year, new brand, right? And I think that branding is, it's interesting when we look at keywords that authors search on Google. It's really funny how much branding actually comes up in terms of authors looking up author branding information and information on what they need to do to have a strong author brand and things like that. But the problem is that I think a lot of times authors assume that branding is optional because we don't always see, and I, as an author myself, we don't always see the immediate penalty for getting it wrong. But branding is really a trust filter. So it's kind of like, and Amy, you and I have had this conversation, right? When an author's branding isn't consistent, it's not always an immediate red flag, but it comes up in things like, I'm not sure what this book is, or the consumer doesn't feel comfortable buying it, or it looks a little amateurish. I mean, I hate to even say that, but that kind of hesitation is really a lost sale. So to some degree, branding part of the reason why I think it's so misunderstood for authors is branding sometimes feels a little nebulous, right?
Right. And I would say branding is definitely really important if you have what we kind of considered next level goals for the kind of coverage you're looking for, especially if you want to pitch media. We see that a lot too, where an author will come to us and they may have a really stellar professional background in their topic, but zero brand, zero platform. And it's really hard to go from that to getting big media coverage.
Right. And I totally agree with that. But I think even just making the sale, so the media, great. And I know a lot of authors aspire to getting big media, but even just as simple as making the sale, because I love brain science. I'm such a nerd about this stuff. And our brains are really pattern recognition machines. So one of the things that we always tell authors, in particular with the Amazon retail pages, is don't make the potential reader try to figure out what you've written about. Be really clear on that. Be clear on that in your book description, in your cover, in the title of your book, obviously. But the reason that branding is so important is the consistency reduces what they call in brain science, like the cognitive load. Now I know I'm going really far down the rabbit hole, but when you create friction, like when you throw something at somebody and they don't immediately know what it is, or their brain can't figure it out, your brain wants to slot this into something that it understands, right? So there have been studies that show that consumers form impressions in under a second. And when we think about yourself, right? Like even if you're scrolling on Instagram or whatever, it takes us actually a fraction of a second to know whether or not we want to dig into something deeper, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So I think the really easy way to kind of put this into words, and again, I could go down the nerd rabbit hole for hours, as Amy knows. But if your bio sounds like one person and your website sounds like another, and your cover sounds like yet another, and your social profiles feel disconnected, now you've caused people, you've just completely lost the reader. And that pause kills all your conversions. So it's really not so much about, like, when we talk about branding, we're really not talking about like, oh, the Coca-Cola branding or what, think of all these big major brands that are out there, right? That's not at all what we're talking about. We're talking about really consistency. I mean, Amy, if we had to break it down to one thing, would you say?
Yeah, absolutely. The consistency across the board to, like you said, as soon as a potential buyer feels confused or you know what I mean? It's over. It's really hard to get them back.
Yeah, it's hard. It's very much hard to get them back. So, so branding is really, when it comes to specifically to author brands, branding is really what readers expect from you. So, and they expect from you and from your genre. Amy, do you want to tackle the first piece of this under that umbrella? Because I think it's definitely a good place to start off with.
Yeah. So, and this is funny because it kind of connects with what we were talking about yesterday with mood boards and things like that.
You're right. Exactly.
Well,
yeah.
Yeah, so branding really it's what readers are expecting, because again, the less friction, like you said, Penny, that you create, the better, the more likely they are to click buy. So branding, yes, I mean, there's a lot that comes into it in terms of visuals, but it's just it's not about you, right? It sounds very simple. I mean, it is about you, right? It's like, you guys are like, what are you talking about? No, it is about you, but it's the version of you that people are expecting to see. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It can't just be about like, I like this, so I'm going to put this all over my Instagram. It's like, that doesn't work. Because if you're sending somebody to your Instagram account, it has nothing to do with your genre or being a fan of your genre, and they don't immediately see an author presence there, they're going to think they got to the wrong spot. And again, that's when you lose somebody. So visual consistency is huge. Covers, photos, colors, fonts. These are all very easy things to keep consistent, believe it or not. I realize if you're already down the path and you've been an author for a while, sometimes refreshing those can be a little labor intensive, but it's absolutely worth it. The difference when somebody lands on an author page and they see covers that have some sort of consistent branding in terms of how fonts are used, the imagery used, it's night and day in terms of professionalism.
Yeah.
Versus an author that jumps around through a lot of different, they've tried a lot of different designers and every single book looks different.
Right. Exactly. And
typically that doesn't work.
And there've been, like, again, this is me with with all my nerdy geek out stuff, but there have been studies that show that consistent branding can increase author revenue by 20 to 30%. And the reason but the reason that number is so high is because you're, as you said, yes, the brand is about you, but it's really about the reader, right? It's what the reader, you are living up to the reader expectations. And if you're, 10 minutes into this podcast, you're just like, oh my gosh, this sounds really overwhelming. We're going to really break it down for you, because the brand refresh that we're talking about doesn't have to take up a lot of time. And we talked about this actually in the green room. And Amy said, a lot of times when we talk about brands, authors think that they have to burn everything to the ground. Like that's not what we're suggesting here. We're suggesting really um tweaks and easy fixes and things that you can do over time. And this also does not have to be done all at once. I mean, Amy,
No,
sorry, I didn't mean to steal your line about burning to the ground, but truly,
no.
I think a lot of people kind of go there, right?
Right. They assume that and I think that's why a lot of authors perhaps hesitate in doing a brand refresh because they put the pressure, they kind of feel this pressure to fix everything at once. I have to go from where I am now to best-selling author. I have to make all these moves and then that's, you know what I mean? And so at some point it's like, oh, that's just too much. And
Yeah.
I believe it is too much. But these small tweaks, the things that we're going to talk about are relatively straightforward and pretty simple to fix. And it's amazing the difference it can make.
Yeah, it absolutely is. So let's start with your author bio. And I'll tell you something, this is one of the fastest,
Mm-hmm.
highest ROI brand refreshes. I mean, start with your bio. The majority of bios that we see on Amazon and elsewhere are outdated, or they're too long, or they're too generic. Like,
Mm-hmm.
Mary, who is from Portland, who loves coffee and her dogs. Like, okay, well, that doesn't tell me anything about why you wrote the book or why you like the genre or why you're the best person to teach me about whatever it is, right?
Right.
So
One of my biggest pet peeves, Penny, and sorry to anybody listening, is that when you have a fiction author and their bio sounds like a resume.
thank you. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
No, it's
exactly.
like that is not the vibe. If you write fiction, that is not the vibe. It doesn't mean, I mean, if you have some very cool, unique background that contributes to your ability to write in the genre you write and to write the stories you do, that's fantastic. But there are fun, interesting, intriguing ways to incorporate that without sounding like you're writing the intro to your CV,
10,000%. I completely agree with that. And I think that, if you need a mini template, um, just jot this down, right? Write one line about who you are as an author, one line about what you write and for who do you write, one line about something that humanizes you,
hmm
and one line in pointing readers where to go next, which obviously ideally should be your website. Jot that down and then from there start to craft your bio. And the other thing that I want to mention too about bios is that your bio can match. So if you wrote, and I use this example in my book from book to bestseller. If you wrote a funny book, so the example I used was this humorous parenting book, your bio should be humorous because if you wrote this humor book, this funny book about parenting, and your bio is like a super serious CV,
Right.
that's a brand mismatch. Do you know
hmm
what I mean? And if you wrote, the same thing is true. Like if you wrote a true crime book, and Amy and I both love the true crime genre. So that was kind of easy to pull out of here. You wrote a true crime book, but your bio is super Pollyanna. I mean,
hmm
not that you have to have this dark, gloomy bio, like, I really like talking about death. It's not, you know what I mean? But I mean, you should, like, what draws you to the genre? Like, why do you like to write about these true crime cases or crime suspense or poetry or whatever that is? Like, that's the thing that your bio should do. So if you're not, and also the other thing is too, is not only is oftentimes these bios are outdated, but they're inconsistent. So the bio on your social media doesn't match the bio on your website, and the bio on your Author Central page looks very different. And that's what I said in the beginning, right? If your bio looks like one person, and sometimes your bio looks like 3 or 4 different people because they don't match across all these platforms, right?
Right,
So anyway,
exactly.
all right, Amy, you get to take on the next one, which is also my favorite. It was really hard because I really wanted to dive into this one. I have really strong feelings about this, but anyway, go for it.
Yes. So making sure your profile photo is the same everywhere. It sounds very simple, but you'd be surprised at how often this doesn't happen.
Oh my
And
gosh.
we've done shows on this. It was actually, I think it was one of our top shows of the year, but about don't be a gray box on Amazon, right?
Thank you.
So if you don't have a photo at all, shame on you.
Yeah.
If you haven't been listening to our shows. But no, truly, it matters. And the photo, it doesn't mean you have to go get professional headshots, but if you've already listened to our show from last week, we had a great reader question or a listener question, excuse me, about this, and we answered it. It came in at the end of the show, so we really kind of went into this. But it doesn't have to be a professional headshot, but it should be something clear. It should be something relatively close up, so they can get a sense of who you are. Don't have your friend cropped out of it just because it happened to be a good picture of you. I know it's really tempting, but having an extra arm or leg in the photo is really confusing, especially when you think about the fact that a lot of times people are seeing these in smaller thumbnails. So like the big version that you're looking at on your phone or on your desktop, you got to shrink that down pretty far and imagine what that looks like online. And there's a big disconnect there. But you also, and I'll just briefly touch on this, you really have to do some serious thinking about if you don't want to use a photo, whether you have a pen name or because of your branding and business goals, whether it's a logo or again, a pen name. So you want to use some other imagery that represents you. We respect that there are reasons to do this, but be really thoughtful about what still makes sense and what's professional. Don't take it so far as to use an emoji or anything like that because, we've done shows on this, but there's a lot of books being created by AI. And one of the red flags is that they don't look like they belong to a real author. And you don't want to give that vibe by using overly silly, comical, unserious, vague imagery as your professional author photo.
Right. Right. I absolutely and completely agree with that. The other thing that I want to say is that if you have a photo that somebody took of you 20 years ago and you really love it, and I see this a lot. I know this is it's really awful that I'm going to say this, but I see this a lot at writers' conferences where sometimes I will go and I want to meet some of the other speakers, and I literally don't recognize them because their bio photo was taken when they were, I don't know, 18. And look, we all age. It's unfortunate, although, by the way, just my little glow up for the new year, a red light mask is amazing. But anyway, I digress.
Yeah, use a current photo
Use a
yeah.
current photo. You know what I mean? And if you
go ahead.
No, but I mean, if you dyed your hair, if you went from brown to blonde or something, then you need to, you need to update your. I mean, just keep it current.
Yes, keep it current and keep it consistent. This is just the short list of places, but definitely Amazon, your website, any of your social media. If you're using a photo in your newsletter, which is actually a really personal way to create that deeper connection, just psychologically with your readers, it's one of those things. Or I see a lot of people doing this more and more now that are putting them in their email signatures as well, a small photo, which I think is brilliant. And the reason this is really so important is, again, there's been such an increase in spam, in bots,
I know.
and I hate to say it, it's really unfair, but the reality is the more inconsistencies there are in your brand in terms of all the places you're trying to show up online, the more hesitant people will be to follow you, to engage with you, to believe that that's actually your account. Again, it doesn't make it fair, but it's the reality of the internet that we're dealing with now. So using a consistent, clear, current photo across the board everywhere that you have a profile option just really instantly solidifies in the potential buyer and reader that this is a brand, this is real, this is worth my time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. And so the next one is refresh your about the book, right? And I think that the majority of authors, whenever, and I love looking at book descriptions. I love looking at the about the book. I love evaluating those and helping authors make those better. But one of the biggest pieces of this that I see is that they bury the lead.
Yep.
Right. So they bury the lead and just a language refresh. I mean, it's a language, a lot of times it's a language clarity problem.
Mm-hmm.
right? Because we wrote the book description. And, look, I get it. When I release a book, like I write the book description, I'm super excited. The book is done. Yay. But I will tell you that, a month after the book is out on Amazon, I'm looking at that book description and I'm like, well, I wrote it in the glow of having the book done,
Yeah,
right? And this book could have been, this book description could have been much better. But I think that it's really, it's also, I mean, it's not just about tinkering with about the book. I get it. That's important. And we've done a ton of shows on that. But it's also, again, it's much like your picture, make it consistent, right? Make sure that it's consistent across the board. And don't, again, don't bury the lead, right? Lead with your book hook. Don't force readers to figure it out because they literally won't.
I know. Or expect them to spend more than 5 seconds assessing whether or not they want to continue,
Yeah,
That's the big
exactly.
problem, is that if you think, oh, I'm going to build this anticipation for how amazing this book is, that's the exact opposite approach you need to be taking.
Yeah.
You really want to get their attention in those first couple sentences. And you know what bums me out, Penny? I see this a lot, where I go to Amazon and I read the book description. And it's like, well, it's okay. It could be better. But then I go to the author's website and they've got this fabulous book description. You know what I mean? It's like actually see that a lot where there is, to your point, a disconnect in the consistency across the board in terms of the time and attention and details spent on describing the book.
Yeah.
And it's like one of those things where I'm like, oh my gosh, like the book description on your website gets me really excited. And then you get to Amazon and it's almost like they figured like, oh, once they're on Amazon, they're already going to buy it. It's like, no, it needs to wow people everywhere. So don't save the best stuff for just your website or just your social or anything like that. You really, you know what I mean? You really want to take it up a notch across the board.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
So
The next one.
unifying one or two brand elements. And I love it. It's like in our notes, we put this sounds fancy, but it's actually very simple. And
Yeah, because when I saw that, I was like, whoa, now talk about going down the rabbit hole. All
I
right.
know
So
now we're unifying. That sounds
right. So simplify. Yeah, now we're using really big words.
really big, intense words. But these are like, simple tweaks to visual elements that really make a big difference. And again, we've touched on this a few times, but using similar fonts across the board, trying to stick to a similar font style, approach, size, all those things, it's amazing the difference it makes.
Yeah.
If you use different fonts for different things, that is showing that nothing is actually really dialed in to what your book is about, the genre, what readers are expecting. If it's just kind of a crapshoot, that's not intentional or thoughtful. You know what I mean? If you just happen to like the font in the moment, or that was the default one that whatever program you were on suggested you use, that's not enough thought, And the same goes for brand colors. Stick to similar color themes when you're creating new places online that you're trying to show up. So that's, obviously your cover on Amazon, that's pretty much set in stone. But, we talked about A+ content recently. That's a big one. Like in your A+ content, stick with colors that make sense for your book cover, that makes sense for your website. And then again on your website, and we talked about this too yesterday, the tone really matters. To Penny's point, if you write in true crime or you write thrillers, if you go to the website and you've got like pinks and lavenders and all this stuff, you're really going to confuse people.
Yeah.
That's not what they're expecting to see. And
Yeah.
so, and again, it's like you may love that color, but it's not about you in a vacuum. It's about the you that is going to appeal to your target market.
Well, and I'll tell you something else. So I'm gonna not get the verbiage correctly on this because there's a name for it, but a brand book. So this is again much like the word unifying. I know this is sending people like they're just, oh my gosh, this is too much for me. So basically, what it is it's a document. So you can use a Word document or whatever it is, and I highly suggest this. Just make a list of the fonts that you're using, right? Your color palette, right? The color palette that you're using, and just keep that. And it's really interesting because I cannot tell you how many conversations that Amy and I have had over the years about like what font did we use for this and what I mean it's really really good to create that kind of a reminder for yourself. And this is like if you have a cover person that comes in and they're doing a cover for you, and here's an example of somebody we worked with, an author, her name is Jenny Hale, and you should look her up on Amazon. She has a lot of books out. She does really really well. Jenny Hale has a really great brand because her color palette, right? Even though her book colors are all different, right? She stays with the same font for her name and the book title.
Mhm.
And the colors of her books are all kind of out of the same sort of color palette. Again, sorry, not to throw out a bunch of $5 words on this thing. And her consistency, and you can pick out a Jenny Hale book from a mile away.
Right. A thumbnail, you don't even need to read who the author is, honestly.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, if you're just like, don't, because a lot of times we get covers designed by people and then these people vanish, or we don't use that same publisher again or whatever. Get all those font names and put them, and hopefully they're consistent, but put them in a document and keep them somewhere, because that will be really helpful for, just
absolutely. And one last piece of this too, I wanted to mention just quickly, if you are on social or if you are using banners anywhere, I mean, and this includes LinkedIn, you have the option to use banners on LinkedIn. So this is not just like, oh, don't worry, I'm not on social media, this doesn't apply to me. Believe it or not, there are banner options in a lot of places. Make sure you keep them current. Like, I know it can be potentially a lot of work, but it should be fun work. When you release a new book, make sure you update your banner image. If that's a lot of work for you, then maybe go with something that's a little more timeless, a little more evergreen, but there's nothing worse than going through to an author's Facebook page and the banner is announcing their new release and that book's been out for 6 months,
Yeah,
it's just one of those things. So make smart decisions. If it's something that you're not able to keep up with or you feel like is a lot of work, but you've already gone down that path, then regroup and do something that is just more brand focused versus title focused. And that way you can keep everything, but kind of right up there with the photo you use. Just anywhere that you have banner or imagery or logos, just make sure those are all the same as well.
Well, and that's where keeping all of your fonts, because the other piece of it though too is that if you're designing a book cover with a specific font, part of brand consistency is that any imagery that you're using to support the launch or the promotion of that book should look like the book. Like,
right.
You know what I mean? So that's really where, and I can't tell you how much those tiny little details matter to readers, not just matter to readers, but really help books sell better because of that, because of the way our minds work and because of that consistency across the board.
Right.
Because again, when you break that connection and you force somebody to figure out what something is, you basically lost the sale.
Absolutely. Yep. Those brand elements are really important. And again, like readers, and then beyond that, because your brand and how you're presenting yourself matters to thought leaders, to, influencers, to media. Everybody's looking, you know what I mean? So don't assume anything is a throwaway.
Right.
Doesn't mean it has to be overly complicated, but nothing is a throwaway. If it's out there, it represents you. You know what I mean? Like hold yourself to a high enough standard that it's representing you really well, no matter who's looking at it.
Well, and when I teach brand classes, the first thing that I tell authors is your brand is talking about you, whether you want it to or not. And do you really like what it's saying? So,
yep.
Yeah. All right. Do you want to take the next one?
Like that frenemy cousin. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So the brand story, also known as your author central content, if we're really going to simplify this, your author central content. This is something that a lot of authors don't use. It's free. If you get your author central account and start exploring, there are a lot of different fields you can fill out. And the one thing that I definitely, if you take away from this, you can be much more creative than what it kind of implies, if that makes sense. There's from the author, about the author, from the back cover, from the inside flap. I realize those sound very direct and like, well, but I just have a Kindle. I don't have a back cover. Ignore that. From the back cover is just another space to talk about your book. From the inside flap is a very exciting, cinematic, punchy way to talk about your book from the authors, where you talk about why you write in this genre, what your books give readers, the themes that you like to explore. You know what I mean? Like, these are free places to add content that 100% elevate not only the reader and shopper experience, but it improves your first impression. It triggers the Amazon algorithm. It is just a really great way to show that you're putting in the effort, right, Penny? Like, by
That you're
adding,
right. It really does, that you're showing up for your own, that you're showing up for your own product. Truly.
yeah, absolutely. And I love this example. I write thrillers because I'm obsessed with the question, what would ordinary people do in extraordinary circumstances?
I love that.
I know, isn't that cool? But these are the kind of things that your brand story, or what all this great content you can put on your page through your Author Central account. These are the kind of things that you get to dive into that really aren't they're not appropriate for the description. They're not necessarily always appropriate for your bio either. But then here you're given this free, content space to get creative and to make that deeper connection with who your readers are, why you write, what makes you an expert in your topic, or you know what I mean? Oh, I love the Author Central content, as you can tell. I got all like excited about it, but it's just really such an underutilized feature. And again, we love anything that's free, right?
Well, and that's the thing though too, is that you want to use it while it's free. But I'm
Right.
not, and I'm not suggesting that Amazon's getting ready to charge for it, but you never know what Amazon's going to do next, right?
Right.
So,
You're going to roll out some extra features that, require some sort of, firstborn or something like that.
right, exactly. Now, if you've been listening to this episode and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm so overwhelmed. Here's the thing. A lot of times brand fatigue, marketing fatigue, let's just call it marketing fatigue, happens when authors think that everything has to be updated all at once. So if you've been listening to the show and you've been taking notes, you're like, oh my gosh, I need to do this and that. You don't have to do it all at once. Readers rarely see everything all at once anyway, right? So start with your bio, which we talked about. And if you have some time, so if you're listening to the show on Friday, if you have some time this week and have somebody take some pictures of you, and I get it, like, especially for, women, I don't know. Somebody can take 45 pictures of me and I'd be like, I hate all of them. Let's try another 45. It's not always, it's not always easy. So give yourself a little bit of time with that. Maybe put that one at the bottom of your list, because I feel you.
Filters are your friend.
Right. Yeah, exactly. But start with something, make a list. And in the I think it was last week's episode, we talked about a book that I read and being 1% better. And so these are 1% changes, right? Make changes to your, Amazon author, start with your bio, and then change that across the board. That's enough for this week, right?
Right. Yes.
Next week, tackle your, as Amy talked about, tackle your banners, and just make a list of things that and hopefully we have given you a cohesive list in this podcast that all fall kind of under that brand umbrella, and then just start to chip away at it. Do not feel like you need to burn everything to the ground. Now, if you have, 6 books out there or 3 books or whatever, and they're part of a series and they look completely disconnected and they look like they don't match, then I would suggest that you listen to our book cover episode from last year, because then you probably do have to change those up. But the majority of you listening are probably not in that place. The majority of you listening probably are just trying to figure out where are the gaps? Where are you losing readers? And that's how we wanted to roll out this year's show, is let's pave the way for a really successful 2026. So we hope that that you've taken some notes, and we hope that we didn't lose everybody like 15 minutes ago. We started to use those big, difficult $5 words. But did I cover everything, Amy? Did we?
Yes, I love the new 1% rule. I think that should be, the theme for this year, because I think it's easy to think like, well, if I don't have time to do all of this, then it's not worth getting started. But that's the exact opposite.
It's the exact opposite. Yeah.
Every little piece that you can do really does matter,
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So we want to thank you again so much for tuning in, and we love your show ideas. So once again, text the word podcast to 888-402-8940. You can communicate with us directly that way. We see them. We will take your questions and answer them on the show ideas, and the listener survey there's a link in the show notes. So be sure to check that out. And I haven't asked for reviews this year, but we love reviews wherever you listen to podcasts. So leave us a review. Let us know. Let us know what you think, and like I said, what you'd like to see more of. And we'll see you next week. Bye bye.